Hello, friends. Welcome to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Chris Motley. And today I wanted to talk to you about detoxing your brain. Do you have issues with short-term memory loss? Do you have those forgetful moments? Do you ever feel like your head's in the clouds or you cannot think clearly because there's too much noise going on in the brain? This could all be a sign of toxicities in the brain. So in this podcast, I want to talk to you about mechanisms of toxicity in the brain. We want to talk about the role of nutrition, how certain nutrients can actually help detoxify your brain. And we're going to talk about different types of infections, such as strep, Lyme disease, and how these types of infections that are neurological can get into your brain tissue, creating this memory loss and doing it at a subclinical level to where we just think it's us feeling as though we're getting a little bit older. But it's not that. It's more of the toxicities growing in abundance. So let's talk about herbs that can help clean out those infections. And I want to talk to you about a couple books like Nutrient Power, Ancient Remedies. These books are written that have different ideas and aspects about brain health, which I think are very helpful. So let's get started about the brain. Now, have you had those moments where you've walked into the room and forgot why you went into the room itself, or you saw a person's face, the next time you see them at the coffee shop, you can't remember their name? Numbers for me were very hard. I used to be able to remember phone numbers so quickly, and this was, before we had all the tablets and the smartphones. But now it's gotten to the point where we depend solely on the phone to remember our numbers. But I remembered numbers so well, but I knew this happened before I had Lyme disease. After I had Lyme disease, I had a hard time remembering numbers, remembering the names attached to the face. Now, when I was very young, before Lyme disease, I had yeast issues. I drank a lot of Coca-Cola, I ate sugar, I snuck it, and I always had sore throats, I always had congestion. I know I had yeast because of all the signs and symptoms I had. I literally would carry Chloraseptic with me to school because my throat would hurt so bad. I don't remember much of my childhood, and I've done therapies. It's not that I'm trying to suppress anything. It was just that I had so much toxicities in my gut and in my brain. There is a definite connection between how we eat and how our brain is healing. And I think that's where East meets West. What are some of the technical aspects of the toxicity that was going on inside of me? And what are some of the symptoms? Now, one of the biggest things that I've seen, though, with my patients is in time, patients who have had a bad memory come in and they say they cannot remember the short-term memory, but the long-term memory works well. They remember what happened when they were 3 years old or 5 years old, a birthday party, but they can't remember what happened 3 months ago. Now, many of us think that happens to all of us. If you're out there listening to this or you're watching it and you say, yeah, it's just me, I'm too busy. And I understand that because many of our thoughts are in the subconscious realm. We're basically doing them in a pattern that we're used to, like driving to the coffee shop or making our cup of coffee in the morning. We honestly don't go in and remember all these things because it's in a subconscious plan. But when patients tell me that they are having short-term memory issues, I specifically check for infections and digestive health. I've had a patient of mine who's a sweet dear lady, and she has told me within the last year that her memory has gone out the door. She's doing her best by taking different types of supplements for brain power, and they do work really well. One's called Memorol, and that's by Zymogen, Xyogen. Zymogen is a good product. There's many that are out there, and they have good components within them to help raise the strength of the brain. But when she told me about this and how she says, I'm getting so scared because when I'm driving, I sometimes forget where I was going or where I'm going and why I went there in the first place. This means technically that the nerves in your brain are not synapsing right. They're not connecting with one another. In fact, the transmission signals are low. So when we say low, they're not fast enough. And what makes your brain transmission faster is the amount of fats and good essential fatty acids around your nerves. They call it the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath insulates your nerves, and it allows your nerves to send quick signals, nerve signals along that nerve for lightning quick response. Now, what happens when the myelin sheath is damaged? This is what happened to my dear patient. She could not think of something quick enough. So the first thing I did was asked her how her diet was, and then I went to check for possible infections. Because that myelin sheath can be destroyed by high sugar diet, a high inflammatory diet, and it can be injured by the activity of neurological infections. So number one, I found out she loves to go have biscuits and sausage every morning. She'll talk to me about that's the only thing that makes her go, but gets her gut been going. But the flour in it is infecting her digestive system with too much sugars and starches. And this is charging up the amount of yeast in her body. She has the classic signs of yeast, a white coating on the tongue. When she spits in the morning, it's almost like it's goo, floats at the top of the water in a cup of water. Also, you have to look for underarms smelling, feet having odor, and even the scalp having an itchiness or dry skin, or if there is too much dried skin on the scalp. If you're getting body odor and you're craving sugar, you know that you're having yeast or fungal issues. So she's having this and she says, yes, I'm eating these things. I'm eating more sugars. And the first thing I'm thinking of is that there's going to be high amounts of yeast creating neurotoxins that can injure the myelin sheath. Remember, guys, side note, if the myelin sheath ever gets damaged or stripped away from the nerves, if it ever creates a brain that doesn't have enough fats insulating it, you're going to have low transmission signals. So her body, from the testing I do kinesiology testing. There's a really good neurological test called Neural Zoomer. You heard me correct. Neural, N-E-U-R-A-L, Neural Zoomer, Z-O-O-M-E-R. And Neural Zoomer basically checks for neurological toxins. It's by Genova Diagnostics Lab. Check them out. The doctors in Dallas, they formulated this because they're finding that the brain with these different neurotoxins was creating an antibody or an autoimmune effect. The body was actually attacking its own tissue within the brain. And all being initiated by different types of fungal toxins and infection toxins and genetics coming into play where your genetics can't handle the detoxification pattern. So the yeast is creating aldehydes, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, acetaldehyde. If you're listening, look for yeast or candida toxins affecting the brain. Google it. There are other ones like formic acid, basically huge amounts of oxidants. That's why we take antioxidants. You can have indolic acid. You could have ammonia. Now, these are all forms of byproducts from infections. So we have the yeast that's in our body, plus there could be a normal amount of parasites in the blood. And they are necessarily creating these toxins that are injuring her nerves and almost like frying her brain. The next thing, after the diet, I was saying, okay, well, there's yeast overgrowth. And she was like, yes, there's yeast overgrowth probably from her cravings. And then I went straight into checking for extra infections. So I did different testing and I found through kinesiology testing that she had possibly the presence of Ehrlichia. Ehrlichia is a Lyme disease co-infection. Now, she told me about 14 years ago that she had Lyme disease, that she was verified with blood tests that she had Lyme disease. But all those years had added up. The infections were not killed basically through the antibiotics. It stayed in the tissue and replicated and kept growing over time in her brain and in her body. So Ehrlichia has grown. And Ehrlichia is what we call ehrlichiosis. It's what you find in dogs and cats. They get internal fevers, joint pain, basically rashes, internal swelling. It can cause rashes all over the skin, but it can cause migraines. Dogs and cats get sick, but it can be in humans now, ehrlichiosis. So she had the yeast. She's shown for ehrlichiosis. You do urinalysis tests through DNA connections. DNA, CONNEXIONS, DNAconnections.com, and it has a tick-borne test, finding out that there's the presence of Ehrlichia through the urine. Trace amounts. I don't care if you go get a normal tick test and they say, oh, you don't have it because only one strand shows up. In my opinion, if you have trace amounts of these infections and they're in the brain, they can cause a lot of issues. So please look into getting a urinalysis. And even if the test says very low amounts, I want you to take it seriously. You want to find a Lyme literate doctor. You want to find somebody who approaches this seriously and do your best to help clean it out. So the Lyme-related bacteria and even Babesia, which is a parasite, what they do is they infect your red blood cells. They injure the cell walls of all your cells. But another thing they do is they will attack the myelin sheath. They can metabolize certain fats and certain sugars. And where's the biggest concentration for you? It's in our brains. Our brains are made of fat and sugar. And these infections go and they feed off of it. So they're going to do their best to go through the blood system. They're finding that infections such as strep, Ehrlichia, all Lyme-related infections, even parasites, are somehow making their way past the blood-brain barrier. A lot of scientific journals are talking about where they've done autopsies on individuals with dementia and Alzheimer's, and they're finding Lyme disease, spirochetes in their brain. So they're finding them in the brain. As scary as it sounds, we're not trying to be scary here. I just want you guys to know that with that, it can create tons of toxicities, again, that's hurting the fatty tissues of the brain, and they're feeding off the sugars, and this is diminishing your brain's ability to carry signals. If you're finding yourself having the same type of symptoms as my dear patient, go get a urinalysis test by DNA Connections. And I would also look into using parasites.org. They have a great parasite, yeast, and bacterial test. And they test for even roundworms. Remember, yeast in the gut, digestive yeast causing infection, toxicities, that's transferring through the bloodstream, through the lymph nodes, up into the brain or near the brainstem, and then you have an old infection of Lyme. This patient had the perfect storm. So, A, you need to cut out sugars as best as possible. Please don't go through this testing and go, oh man, I have to clean up every single thing and stop eating cold turkey. I am not saying that. Do your best to look for an anti-inflammatory diet. Do your best to cut out the processed and refined sugars. Even if it means in your morning, you having a little maple syrup or a little honey, cutting out the creamy dairy or using a plant-based dairy that's clean and organic with your coffee. Try to reduce the refined sugars or the simple sugars that are feeding the infections. Cut out wheat, grains, excessive dairy. Cut out corn and starches that could feed the infections for a small time. Now, you can do it gradually, even if it means I'm cutting it out by 30% or 50%. And then as you cut it out, you're going to start noticing that your cravings can get lower. Infections, when they start, will come out more. You'll have more body odor. You'll have more smells out of your body. You have more bowel movements. You'll actually sometimes feel more dizzy. Why? Because the infections are running and they're scrambling because they need food. And you're going to crave sugar. You're going to crave sugar. You're going to want sugar. but you have to do it in increments. You can do where you find something with a low glycemic index, like using Manuka honey, or using something with a low glycemic index that gives your mouth a little bit of sweet while doing your best to abstain from all the refined sugars so you don't feed the infections. Eventually, they'll start to starve out and you'll stop craving the sugars. I say then you want to make sure that your digestive tract is healthy, and you want to make sure that your upper digestion can handle good fats and good proteins. If you get indigestion when you eat some of these, please find a nutritionist or find a good holistic practitioner that can test you for food sensitivities. Because sometimes we'll start taking people off sugars, and everybody says, well, to eat a whole bunch of fats and eat a whole bunch of proteins. But what if your stomach is so weakened from the infection that you can't even produce the enzymes to break them down? That happens all the time in my office. People's gallbladders are so tired and fatigued, they can't even eat anything rich or creamy. They can't eat fats. So you have to take an enzyme like lipase. So you may have to use a food enzyme for a short time. You may have to do that. But the goal is to reduce sugars, increase good fatty acids, and these fatty acids will start to coat the brain. So they even showed through, I think it was the American Journal of Epidemiology was saying that people who were eating higher amounts of fish with good omegas within just a few weeks leads to like memory scores that are similar to individuals that are like 4 years younger than them, just by eating fish every day for almost 2 weeks. Just giving your body the good fats. So I don't want you to get overwhelmed. Reduce sugars, maybe take some digestive enzymes, increase your fats, increase maybe some fish if you like fish, but make sure you use and find fish that's not like just the regular processed, because they can be high in mercury and high in heavy metals. So you want to find a good clean source as much as possible. And that's another subject, is heavy metals. So not only do you want to check for these infections, but on a side note, I want you to look into heavy metal testing. My mom has had brain fog for a while as we clean out Epstein-Barr virus. And one of the things she showed extremely high on, even though she doesn't eat a ton of fish and doesn't have any more of the fillings in her mouth, high amounts of mercury staying in her body, in her cells, and literally causing manic type behavior at times in the past, not now. If you're showing manic or memory loss, check for heavy metals also. And I want you to write this down. If you find heavy metals, as a side note, look at apple pectin or concentrated pectin, Pectin, glutathione, and I also think chlorophyll. Those three are super good at helping detoxify metals. Find a doc who knows how to detoxify metals. But you want to get that out of the body, and you want to choose fish that doesn't have a lot of metals or toxins within them, okay? That's a side note. Remember, pectin, glutathione, and chlorophyll. So, we want to make sure that we have our diets changed. We want to test like urinalysis, find if there's any Lyme disease or any parasites or mold or fungus or yeast or bacteria. If you find them, such as strep or staph, you find any Lyme disease, you want to make sure you find a doctor that can get after these infections and clean them out. Don't wait around. Don't wait around and say, oh, I'm going to wait for a little while. I got to take care of other family members and get theirs first. No, if you're the caretaker, you better take care of yourself. One of the things I really love to talk about is a few of my go-tos for brain health in general. Now, you can look at some of the podcasts I've done about Lyme disease. There's really good herbs there. A couple of the things I really love to talk about is when you're talking about increasing fats, we want to make sure that you also increase antioxidants. And antioxidants are in the forms of berries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries. You want to make sure you eat foods that are rich in antioxidants to get all that heavy metal damage, all that neurological infection damage out of the brain. Increase the berries. You can even look at things like asparagus. Asparagus will help pull a lot of that out. Cilantro. Using these in your daily diet, in your soups, to help pull out heavy metals and toxins. I like a good supplement that has all these berries in it. It's called Thera Supreme, Thera Supreme by Supreme Nutrition Products. It is phenomenal. I use it, and it helps drain all the infections and toxicities very efficiently out of the tissues and out of the joints. But my other go-tos, guys, everybody listening, if you're wanting to get your brain health stronger, I like Vital Guard Supreme. Vital Guard Supreme is chrysanthemum by Supreme Nutrition Products. Chrysanthemum has been used to clean out infections. In Chinese medicine, it's used to clean out multitude of infections. Yeast, mold, bacteria, parasites, virus. It's safe for pregnant ladies. It's safe for children. They've used it in utero with the ladies and with the women because it helps clean out the system, encourages the strength of the kidneys, which raises the qi in the body. And the chrysanthemum cleans out a multitude of infections. But it's also strengthening. Chrysanthemum is very neurologically brain healing and heart healing. So to keep mother strong, they would use in Chinese medicine to keep the heart and brain strong of the mother and the child. It's amazing. To me, it's one of my go-tos. I love Vital Guard. In fact, during the winter, I take chrysanthemum just to keep the infections at bay as a preventative. So look at Vital Guard Supreme to help encourage the neurological strength, the processing of the brain. And sometimes I add in another one called Bacopa. Bacopa. Just remember those two. Vital Guard Supreme, which is chrysanthemum, and Bacopa. If you look at many of the supplements out there, Bacopa is basically an herb that is used in many of the brain strengthening formulas. You watch, they all have it. So you want to use Bacopa, and I usually take it one capsule 2 or 3 times a day because it gives me a pick-me-up. It actually helps my brain stay steady and strong and clear-minded when I'm here at the office, right here, when I'm working. I'm about to start my day here in just a few minutes, and when I do it, I put in my Bacopa, and I usually use different types of tinctures to encourage the strength of my kidneys during the day. It works. Vital Guard Supreme, Bacopa. One of the other ones I really love to use is Host Defense. Host Defense is by Paul Stamets, but he has, if you can research it, a powder. It's for brain energy. Just research it. Brain Energy Powder, Host Defense Company. Paul Stamets created a great mushroom blend. I mean, I love even chaga root. I love it. When we have it here at the office, you put that powder in your coffee, you can blend it up, and you're going to give yourself the adaptogens to help not only raise your adrenal glands and thyroid productivity, but increase the brain energy, but just also it's immunomodulant. It helps your cells be able to find out infections like viruses and bacteria. So mushrooms are so good at raising the immune system, but training your immune system and also cleansing the brain alongside helping the adaptogenic formulations of the kidneys and the thyroid and even the adrenal glands. So I say use that brain powder as well. You don't have to use them all at once. Try them out. Check out which ones work for you. And a couple of books I really love to look into one's called Nutrient Power. Now, Nutrient Power is by William Walsh, Walsh, PhD. He goes through some amazing research about what nutrients to use to raise the strength and heal the brain. Please check this book out. It goes into more in depth. I love it because it tells me some of the things that they use, like CoQ10, alpha lipoic acid, vitamin E, vitamin D. It goes through all of that. Please check that book, Nutrient Power by William Walsh. Now, another one's by Dr. Josh Axe. It's Ancient Remedies. He goes through many of the herbals that help with certain organs. And one of the main areas I love to look in that book is for cleansing of the spleen and kidneys. Spleen and stomach meridian and kidneys, which all help with the brain. Look in that book, Ancient Remedies, and look at some of the herbs and spices that are used to help with the spleen and the stomach and the kidneys. Doing your own research, finding out which infections you have is some of the ways you're going to be able to help clean your brain and your body. And so when you do this research, remember, you're not stuck with this brain issue. If you really want to go in very deep, look into the neural zoomer test by Genova Diagnostics. But there are many things out there, many testing that allows you to get an insight I'm here just to help to make sure that you look into some of these nutrients, because it then progressively gives you an idea of what else to look for with research to help your brain power. You can get your brain back. It's not stuck like this forever. But there is a time and amount of detoxing you must do. If you had an infection for a very long time, you may need to be detoxing for a while to heal your brain. I want you to remember that. Don't get discouraged. Keep going. It's tough, but I've seen patients get their brain back. So if you guys have any other questions, any other comments, if you want to hear more information, please send us a comment in the comment section. Like and subscribe if you like this channel. Send it to somebody who may have some neurological issues or brain fatigue. And we always want to make sure that you get the cleanest, clearest, simplest type of information on this podcast. So again, message us, keep us posted on how you're doing, and I hope that you find this helpful. All right. Until the next time, I hope you guys have a great day. We'll talk soon.